I bring you the internet with my internet key. Okay. So, thank you to everybody to be here, and thank you to Nancy and Ilaria to invite me to speak about ICOM and Museal Association. I am the vice president of AVICOM, that is an international committee of ICOM world. You know what ICOM is. ICOM is the most wider museum professional community. It started after the Second World War, and it is the institution that, for example, built the definition of museum that is in use in this moment for all the museum professionals. I have a position also in ICOM Italy, where I am the coordinator of the thematic commission about audiovisual and new technology in museums. We do a lot of activity, and our most broader activity, sorry for the Italian, is to bring a sort of link between AVICOM World and ICOM Italy. AVICOM, as you can see from the website, is the ICOM International Committee for Audiovisual and New Technology of Image and Sound in Museums. It is interesting for me because it starts from museum and museum professional, and how do they apply the technology inside the museum. AVICOM exists from 1991. The first president was Marco Tonon, an Italian researcher, a professor, and a museum professional, that started to argue how technology can be used inside the museum. You know that technology in museum is in use from a lot of years before 1991, about collecting, restoring, making database, categorizing the masterpieces. But it is interesting that Marco Tonon and AVICOM organized a sort of award that is called the FIAMP, and it is a sort of competition between multimedia products in museum. It is interesting for me because it gives a sort of state of the art about the adoption of technology inside museum. I was talking with Professor Paolini in here during the coffee break, and we were talking about the fact that museum professionals have contacts with IT professionals, but they have very different expectation about the use of technology inside the museum. Technology can be used in a very lot of fields inside museum, but it can be about communicating heritage. And so think about a website of museums that can be ancient or newer. But it can be also to give experiences to visitors. And so making them experience something about the heritage, about the objects that are inside the museum, inside the walls of the museum or during the visit, or outside of that, so at home, in the coach, wherever you like. And it's interesting for me to see what are the categories of FIAMP prize. And now I switch to another application. I don't know if it's tiny fonts. So let's go back to the website because we have We started in 1996. So the categories of the FIAM Prize, it is a sort of archaeology of software, were CD-ROMs, and that's the winner is. And audiovisuals are videotapes. Audiovisual, here we are, divided in categories. And started in the year to have, I don't make the list of all the winners, but they started to award also website and then the interactive screens that can be in the museum. In the last year, there was the last FIAM Prize that were in Montreal in 2012. They had also website in general category, website, exhibition and events, the audiovisual, and also the multimedia award that started to award also mobile experiences or augmented reality experiences that museums are carrying out and sending to FIAMP to have the award for some category. So museum professionals think about what is the better experience that a visitor can have about heritage. Probably museum professionals in a lot of museums, little, big, and so on, they don't want to build the state-of-the-art application stunning with the most impressive technology, but they think about what is the best experience that visitor can have and what they can learn more with technology from the objects that they are observing. And there is the same discourse that we can do about also intangible heritage, because a lot of museums are about objects, masterpieces, paintings, and so on. But there are also science centers or ethnographical museums that have got heritage that is not the object, but some concept, the history, music, sound, and so on. So those are the condition about the association of museum professionals that are in touch to discuss what is about using technology inside the museum. So I think that's what I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm here if you have questions about. Oh, please, the microphone, or talk louder. No.
Is there any question? I have a question. I know. Is it working?
No. Please come here.
This one? Yeah, okay. Now, my question, I know that ICOM is has not yet a position about the idea of having this association of mobile tour professionals.
Are you talking about ICOM World or ICOM Italy?
Of course, we would love to be in the ICOM world, because the idea of the association is to having an international association of professionals. And of course, we can start, if it is simpler, we can start from Italy and then maybe try to go up, as we talked about a little bit with Mrs. Vannini, me and Nancy once on the phone. And
I would like to explain that there is the ICOM World, that is the International Association about Museum Professional. ICOM world works with, we call them regional committees, that are the national committees, ICOM Italy, ICOM France, ICOM Canada, and so on. They are linked together, but also not. So there can be ICOM World projects as the Blue Shield, for example, that is a very important rescue mission about destroyment of masterpieces in museum. Think about Egypt, for example, or when an archive drops down. It happens in Germany years ago. And there is the Blue Shield activity that is about rescue masterpieces and objects and giving strict guidelines to have security inside the museum, inside an archive, and so on. So ICOM has got regional committees and also thematic international committees as AVICOM.
And we would love to go into the thematic fields.
Come inside AVICOM. I'll be pleased to have you as member, as a vice president. János Tari is the actual president of AVICOM, elected with me in the last month. And it can be interesting to making the proposal to János and to committee. But I have also to tell you that ICOM International, ICOM Italy, or AVICOM has got an executive board. So I think that I am not in the position to answer to this question as AVICOM, even if I am the vice president. And I think that probably you are here as an international group, so probably it is more interesting for you to ask to ICOM World or to ask ICOM Italy. Yes. I really don't know, because even if I got a position, I am in executive broader board of ICOM Italy, I think that I'm not able to answer to your question.
Yes, but we don't want an answer today. We just wanted to start the discussion about this because we get in touch with Mrs. Vannini and with Mr.
That is National Secretary of ICOM Italy.
And with Mr. Stefano Filipponi, who is the president of the Tuscan session of ICOM. And
the regional coordination of ICOM Italy.
Okay, thanks. And we just wanted to set up a discussion about this. And there is another issue that is worrying me, because when we talked with Mrs. Vannini, she said that professional can have problems in presenting project to ICOM. I mean, doesn't work.
Most of the people in this room are not working for museums or nonprofits.
I see.
I'm just curious, how many of you in this room are members of ICOM as per your organizations, not as individuals? So what are the opportunities for professionals, for commercial organizations to participate in ICOM and in ICOM projects?
We had this problem some years ago in AVICOM, because I am in AVICOM from a lot of years. And I remember that there were a lot of IT professionals or audiovisual professionals that joined AVICOM. It was very interesting, and I had the great pleasure to meet and to know Marco Tonon, that is the founder of AVICOM, because he argued in the foundation of AVICOM, but also later because he is doing a lot of museological projects in the world, now in Brazil. And he argued that AVICOM can become the point of touch between museum professionals and IT people, IT professionals, because the thing that I was telling you before, so there are, how can I say, there is a sort of misunderstanding between IT and museum people. What museum want to do with the objects and what IT can propose, that is all the things that you can imagine you can do with the technology. So I think that can be very useful to build a place where IT people can join a museum professional, also to develop standards
Yes.
or to develop best practices. Something like that, because it can be a starting point also to avoid the terrible amounts of money can be spent from institution building something that can be useless in some years ago, or making a museum professional understand that if they build something with technology, this will be implemented in the years, because a museum professional also now has not got this knowledge about how technology works, that in 2 years or 3 years you have to drop down everything and to rebuild the software, update the projectors, the lamp.
And that's why the idea of bringing people coming from different world, from different fields, is the base of the idea of the association, to be together and discussing before doing things, not at the end, to define before the language and the standard, as we talked in this.
I've seen 2 questions. The first one is Maria Teresa Natale from Otebach.
You told about the fact that you have museum professional from one side and IT technologies that can propose a very innovative solution, but I think that there is also a third protagonist, which are the users, of course. And I was wondering if there are new studies about the usage of mobile technologies. As Otebach, which is a little observatory in the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage, we are collecting in a database literature about this. And, but we have seen that there are very little studies about users. What do they really want? I mean, IT technologies propose virtual environments or many things, but when I go around the Colosseum, I live in Rome, and I find thousands of people. Most of them don't use the telephone in this way, or still now use paper or paper guides or so on. So I think this is a very important thing to do studies and to invest money to do this kind of studies to know what really the user wants. Because probably at the end we will discover that they want easy thing and usable thing, especially if they are tourists, of course. Okay, inside or outside the museums.
Thank you, Maria Teresa, very much. I know very well the activity of the Otebach Osservatorio Tecnologico per i beni e le attività culturali of the Ministry of Cultural Assets in Italy. And I agree with your question. I know that you did a very beautiful benchmarking research about the quality of website and also other technological products about heritage. And I have also to tell you that, for example, in Italy there is a company called Fitzcarraldo that did a very useful, for UNESCO, I know, a very useful research about user activity involving technology inside museum or outside. But I agree very much with you, because probably we need a sort of a visitor community of young people, of teenagers, AVICOM teenager or Museum on the Web teenagers, that can give us the reality datum about the use of technology for browsing heritage, for having heritage in the hand, that can be very useful also for us. Thank you very much. I've seen another question. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm dumb.
But I wanted to observe, just from the way that this discussion is going, that I think that this one work. Ooh. Works. All right. So I think we actually have two different discussions going on here. One of them is about the nature of a professional association, what we would want it to do, what its activities would be. Do we want to have an annual meeting? Would it be an opportunity to create resources that would be shared for the dissemination of exemplary projects or standards work and that sort of thing. And I think that is a useful discussion to have in this room at this point. As to how that organization might be constituted and where, I think that's a separate discussion, and maybe one that would be useful to tease out a little bit, but not necessarily complete. I am actively involved in another ICOM international thematic committee, CDOC, which I think is a spectacularly useful group.
Yeah.
Partially because it formalizes the course of an annual meeting, because there are some resources devoted to the dissemination of information, because it does gather an international community of users. But ICOM is also, as we've already said, difficult to crack.
Why?
Whether or not it is something that we could move quickly toward having a committee formalized for is questionable. I think so. It might be worthwhile to actually say we're going to do it, and then pursue the question of ICOM later. But first, we really need to understand what it is that what the activities of such a group would be, and I think that that might be the more useful part of this discussion.
Which is kind of what I was thinking is, what's the point? Like, I mean, we could create an industry association, but what problem are we trying to solve? And I don't know, as a vendor, access to more deals is pretty much the problem that we want to solve, and access to tenders is probably the only real thing that I want solved. But what do you see a professional association? What do you want to solve?
One of the most useful things that CDOC does, I think, for the vendors is to help them to understand the ways in which museums want to interact with their products. And it was in CDOC that the application of standards, really sort of filtered down through to the collection. In this case, the collections management community. It was a very, very important set of discussions. No.
So I'd like to respond to that by saying I think what we want to do is kind of open up that question, which is to say that in order to have access to more deals and more tenders, we actually need to improve the quality of the product in the market overall. And that one of the big problems that mobile vendors have faced, certainly since I became involved in the industry, is that if a visitor to a museum takes one bad audio tour, they will never take another one. And they don't know that you made it or Antenna made it or who else, and they don't care. So there is a way in which collaboration becomes, altruistic egocentrism or something. that really by collaborating we can improve the market for everybody. Because we remain in this situation where, for permanent collection tours, the average take-up rate remains pretty firmly below 10% and in most places below 5%. And the question that I'm very keen to answer is that because, frankly, only 5 to 10% of the human population wants to take tours? Or is it because we're not marketing it well? Or is it because there have been so many bad ones that people have been turned off it? What's the root of that problem that there seems to be a glass ceiling on the participation in the market there?
Following also what Nancy said, I'd like to bring another question that I always raise with David Berman and Museum on the Web. We come at this meeting or we go at Museum on the Web and we see the best production of the best museums, but how many are these museums? 10, 20, 30 in the world? What about the rest of cultural heritage worldwide? So 10% take the mobile tour there at your museum. How many people you see in Florence taking a mobile tour in the city? Close to zero? Less than zero. How many you see them around Italy? First of all, American institutions, North American big institutions are different from European institutions for several reasons. Because the business model is different, the audience is different, and you have problems. In the rest of the world, there are additional problems. The business model is different, the people is different. Italy is a museum as a country, not just as museums. So the landscape is a museum, the archaeology is a museum. So I think we are very far away from understanding how this technology should go in the field. We are really far away. So we can take the best American museum as at least we see something done. But I don't think we just take that model and say that will work in Florence, that will work in Rome, because everything is not working. In Italy, we have terrible experience with telephone company making terrible audio tour, terrible. In the sense, they took the big sign written in a terrible Italian by itself, they put it on the phone, and then they say, the people don't want to use the phone. Of course, I don't want to read it, and even less I want to listen for 10 minutes something terrible. So we had the terrible experiences in Italy. So I think we need some kind of discuss why this technology is not penetrating more. Now, I don't believe that's tablet. Tablets were around for a long time, they didn't work. Finally, Apple found a way, everybody wanted the tablet. But tablet existed much before. So I think in the mobile and cultural heritage, we need something similar to find what's a combination of content, cost, availability, something that make it work. Because in principle, I think every tourist would like to go to Florence and understand it better with the mobile device. But it's not happening. What's wrong? The business model, the communication model, the content, something must be wrong. We cannot say everyone is stupid in this room. I think everyone is smart in this room, but still it's not there. So we should understand and accepting the biodiversity, because being different business model. So even in the States, I think there is too much. It's easier to sell an audio guide for an exhibition, because the people who want to go to exhibition very often they want to understand the exhibition. In a permanent collection, it's different. It's more difficult, also for cultural reasons. I went to the Louvre and the Egyptian section, took the tour, and it's difficult to follow because it's not one specific subject like an exhibition. It's about the ancient Egypt. How much you're gonna teach about ancient Egypt. So I think there are some also problems of cultural communication. Permanent collections are more difficult than exhibitions, because exhibition you have different visitors probably also, different motivation. So I think we need to have a global effort and saying it's not just a matter of production. Something is wrong, something is still not well understood, and we should try different directions until we understand why it's not happening. Because in most of the world, the mobile technology is not there.
I just wanted to add something. I agree that we cannot take the foreign example and bring it in Italy and just apply them, but I think that the exchange that can come from this association can raise the quality, and I feel this as a strong need in Italy. Maybe it's just an Italian need, so we will wind up making an Italian association and we'll be all alone. I hope not. I hope not. Yeah.
So I have a very, as a client, right, I have a very practical thing that I would want from a professional association, and that was a little bit about what Glenn was saying. I'm lazy. I don't want to write a good tender or request for proposal. I don't know how to write a tender for an augmented reality app. I would have to sit down and invent it. And if one company tells me, well, here's what I should ask for, I won't believe you. But if a professional association of a dozen companies say, well, here's an example, request for proposal, here are the things that for an exhibition tour you should ask for, and here are the things for an augmented reality app that you need to consider, that would be something from a professional association that would help me as a client give you a better tender to compete on. But that doesn't exist.
I think there is a problem from different countries where we must connect the countries and the association in the countries. For example, in France, we have a CLIC, is an association who have 100 museums. And when we are in a museum in the web in the USA, there is 5 or 6 French people. So there is a problem to connect association between the countries. And for professionals and companies and the museum, I think the good size is little associations and connection between the associations by one member who is member of the other association. Vendors can have own association, and when the president, for example, is member of association of museum, there is sometimes events with the two associations can be together, but when you have a big association with a lot of profiles, it's a problem to have real projects, I think.
Worthwhile to actually see if they're, what the enthusiasm for such a group.
In a brute force way. Let's imagine that at 2 p.m. Eladia creates this association in Italy. How many of you here would be interested in participating, whether you're an Italian company or not? Okay, so you've got that's good. So we've got an international group. Was that a little bit fewer than 10? Still, doesn't. Okay, that's good. So how about an international mobile professionals association? Who would participate? Vendors or museum professionals? But I mean, I guess if you're sticking your hand up, I'm imagining that you can imagine some useful problems for a group to solve.
Yeah, I mean,
Jury's out whether this would, yeah. What would be the thing to do? So I mean, more than half of us in this room are interested, which is presumably part of why you came today. Sorry. Buy this sample. But I mean, that's an interesting start. Yes.
So now we should decide how to go on. I mean, what the next step, if we want to go on this, which could be the next step, I think starting a discussion in the web, I mean, because and maybe meeting, I don't know if all of you will be in Baltimore, I hope so. Pretty nice. We all hope so. So we can go on discussing it and maybe trying to set up, me and Nancy, something and share. No.
I guess I would just say in response to, I think Susan made a good point that maybe we don't need to solve the question of ICOM, AVICOM today. On the other hand, I do think that being part of an existing organization, and in fact I think this was your idea, Susan, does shorten the route. It makes it a little bit easier for us to piggyback on an existing infrastructure, set of norms, relationships. There are already designated places and times to meet each year, that kind of thing. So I think that also is quite an important conversation to continue, just to see if that would be a good route for a mobile professional association to go and affiliating itself somehow with ICOM, AVICOM. And maybe it won't work out, but I think along the way we would learn some things that would be useful to whatever the final answer is.
association itself and what it does.
So I think in terms of a very early step as to how to start, soliciting some expression of interest from a group that's broader than just the people in the room would be useful for knowing the extent and the scope of that effort, and also may be useful for determining whether there's already an overlap with existing ICOM or AVICOM committee members. So I think as a first step, it's soliciting an expression of interest for who thinks this is valuable, and who are you, where are you, what is your role, and exactly.
Just to add, Susan, you had the pitch this morning about the mobile book sprint, and to me, associations are about publishing knowledge and sharing knowledge. So this should be the first one that ties in, and actually, people who associate with that activity and it's tangible suddenly, they would be almost automatically founding members of the association, and that's a series of tangible products over time, and the rest will follow.
Good. So, how are we doing on time here? Would we like to, if anybody else has something they want to say, please stick your hand up. If not, I don't think anybody's ever objected to breaking early for lunch. Okay. Everybody needs some more. Okay, so lunch will be outside. Let's continue the conversation, and I think I will take away these two kind of action points of soliciting expressions of interest in a professional association, and perhaps looking at the mobile book sprint as a kind of a first project. And we can certainly make meeting space available at Museums in the Web in Baltimore to continue the conversation. So if you know you'll be there or would like to recommend someone else join us, please do let me know. Oh yeah, sorry. Ilaria, could you talk about the logistics for the tour before we break?
The logistics of the tour will be, we have to start with Santa Maria Novella because there has been a change in the organization. So we will move directly from here. We can walk there. I think is a short, no, it's not short, it's 20-minute walk, but it's a walk in the center of Florence, so it's nice. And we will start the tour in Santa Maria Novella, and then we'll walk around using the app, and then we will be free, and we will meet for dinner.